Hey, this is Daniel Naden, and I'm going to teach you how to play Broken King, the only metal song that I have officially written and released up to date, and the tuning is drop D. The intro sounds something like this. Is hitting the low D string and sliding up to the 5th fret of the A string for that octave. And then the rest of it just follows as standard drop D bar chords on the 6th, 5th, and 3rd fret until the last repeat where you hit 2 times on the 1st fret. The 2 key elements to keep in mind to have this riff truly give off the right feel, I think, would be the little chugs in between some of those lines, where it's just a low D string. And it's just quick and kind of gives a little more groove to it, as well as the slide from the 3-5-3 in the middle of it. Because it's not a hammer-on, it's not... It's neither of those. It's a slide. And then a pull-off to the low D string. Doesn't need to be both the D and the A string. It can just be the D string, because that's how I played it. The next riff leads in right at the end of the first riff, and it's basically just the same thing, but at maximum volume. And with that ending, there's a bit of a chug to the 3, and then the 1, and then an open D with the D chord on the G and B strings. And then an octave up, just for a nice little effect at the end. The next riff is what we called the main riff in the songwriting process. Although there's nothing really main about it, seeing as how it's not a verse or a chorus or anything like that. It's just kind of the lead into the verse. But we called it the main riff, so I'm going to call it that for the rest of the lesson. And it sounds something like this. Starts with the D power chord with an open scratch, then 3 more hits, and then a little bit of a chug or a scratch before entering into the 3-5-6-5-3-5, which is what the next part would be. Right, those are the notes. But the key thing about that part of the riff is that it's a slide from the 3-5, and then the rest of it is picked. So the 3-5 at the end is picked too. And then it's a repeat of that first 0 sequence, but it ends with this 3 and 1 on a low D string. And the key thing about that part is you've got to have the vibrato in those low notes. verse riff is a bit of a ripoff from the Doom E1M1 theme, the Hanger song, and I thought it would be cool to kind of sneak a little bit of it in there as a tease. I liked the groove of it, and I figured we could use it in the song, have a different ending to it. If you don't know, the E1M1 riff sounds a little bit like this. Except in E, and not all on one string. So the verse riff sounds something like this. The verse riff is again comprised of just one string chugs on the low D string and power chords on the rest. The power chords being the 5-7 on the A D strings, the 3-5, the 1-3, and the 0-2. And then power chords on the lowest two strings, 2-3-2. And the key thing about that ending part is that it's all hammer-on pull-off to give a little bit more of a lazy feeling to it. I don't remember if that was intentional or not, but that's just how it was. In the whole verse, you can hear these lead overdubs when the guitar cuts out while the vocals are going. And they sound something like this. And basically what that is a whole step bend on the 7th fret of the G string, and then a hammer-on pull-off sequence on the 5 and 7 of the G string. They vary throughout both verses, but that's the core element of that lead overdub. So it's like... The pre-chorus riff is just the power chords on the 3rd fret of the D and A string, the 1st fret, and the open strings, with chugs at the end on the open strings. And then ending specifically with that open D on all the 5 strings. The chorus riff sounds something like this. So the way that goes is the 5-3 on the A and D strings for that power chord, and then the 5th fret of the low D and A, and then to the 1, and then a bit of a hammer-on pull-off from the 1-3-1 to the 0. And it's all down-picked. The main riff, the verse, the pre-chorus, and the chorus once more. After the second verse, it plays the main riff 2 times, and then the bass goes back to the verse riff while the solo happens. And the solo sounds something like this. The first part of that solo is bending up to a note, right? So it's that whole step bend from the 13th fret up to that 10th fret of the E or 15th fret of the B. And then it's the 12 on the G that's bending while the 13 on the B remains stationary. And then it's a bend from the 13 on the D to the 10 on the G, ending on a 12 on the high D, with vibrato, of course. And then do it again. The second part of the solo is this shred line, I guess you could call it, between the 10, 13, and 15 on the high E. Throw a few notes in there, I guess, if you want. And then a slide up from the 15 to the 18 on the E string to bring it up to 15, 18, and 20 on the E string and the B string. The key part about the solo is that it ends on this bend from the 20 to the 22nd on the high E. I'm sorry, wrong fret. And then it ends on that double bend from the 20 on the B to the 17 on the high E. And then repeats the pre-chorus and chorus riffs. The breakdown riff sounds like this. The breakdown riff starts with the single notes on the low D strings, and it's just a pull off from the first fret to the open string with a chug pattern to it. And then a pull off from the 3 to the open string. And then one more chug before sliding from the 1st to the 5th fret. And then a 5, 6, 5 to close it out. And then it repeats later on with the full power chords. And then it ends with that 6, 5, 3, 5, 3, 1 open D.